Good morning, everyone. My name's Stephen Good. I'm Chief Exec at the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, Scotland's National Innovation Centre for Construction and the Built Environment. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you all today to our Building to COP26 event, the first in a programme of events and initiatives we have planned in the lead up to, during and after COP26 this November. I'm delighted to be joined by a fantastic panel of construction and built environment leaders, change makers and innovation champions from across Scotland and the UK today. First, we have Peter Reekie, Chief Executive of the Scottish Futures Trust, Chair of the Scottish Construction Leadership Forum Executive Group and a board member of the UK Construction Leadership Council. We also have with us Professor Sean Smith, Director of the Edinburgh Future Institute Centre for Future Infrastructure and the School of Engineering's Chair of Future Construction at the University of Edinburgh, as well as current member of the Chair of the Infrastructure and Environment Group of the Scottish Research Partnership in Engineering. Delighted to welcome Lynn Sullivan, OBE. Lynn's an architect and design consultant who chaired the Scottish Government's low carbon building standards strategy for Scotland back in 2007. Some of you may recall it as the Sullivan Review. Lynn is also a visiting professor at Robert Gordon University, a board member of the Passive House Trust and the Construction Leadership Council's Green Construction Board, and chair of the Good Homes Alliance. Professor Steve Petrie is with us today too, and is a Business Performance Director at Balfour Beatty, Chair of Skills Development Scotland, Scottish Apprenticeship Advisory Board, and a board member with ourselves at the Innovation Centre. And Alan Wilson, last but no means least, is Managing Director of Select, the trade organisation for the electrical contracting industry here in Scotland, as well as Chair of the CICV Forum, the network of trade, professional and federation bodies that came together last year to tackle COVID. And to kick the session off this morning, we're delighted to welcome Ivan McKee, Minister for Business, Trade, Tourism and Enterprise at Scottish Government and also Chair of the Construction Leadership Forum. I'll hand over to Minister in a second, but before we get underway, I'd like to highlight just a couple of quick housekeeping points to help the webinar run as smoothly as possible. Firstly, this session is being recorded today and the presentations will be available next week. A link will be sent to all those who have registered for the event. All participants will be on mute for the duration of the webinar, but I do encourage you to please ask questions throughout. To do so, click on the questions in the control panel, type in your question and press send. We'll try and answer as many of them as we can during the Q&A session that we have set aside for today. Your feedback is extremely important to us, so we'll note every question, and if we don't have time to answer them all today, we'll incorporate them into future events in this series. There'll also be some interactive polls displayed on your screen during the programme today. Please answer them if you can as quickly as possible. It'll allow us to get real good and sharp audience feedback, and we'll display the results for everyone to see during the webinar. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Mr. McKee, please, first for some introductory comments.
Good morning, Stephen, and hopefully that's my camera and my microphone both on and you can hear me loud and clear. The joys of working in this virtual environment. I'm delighted to be here this morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to join this webinar. And I just want to kind of set the scene a wee bit and talk about the importance of COP26 in Glasgow and the importance, obviously, of the construction sector and the built environment in that context. Hopefully to set the scene for the panel discussion that's coming up. I think Scotland's commitment to tackling the climate emergency is well known, certainly in Scotland and I believe internationally as well. We're one of the first countries to declare the climate emergency, and we are very clear in terms of our policy direction, our aspirations for net zero by 2045, 5 years earlier than the rest of the UK. Some of the most ambitious targets in tackling the emissions challenges in legislation anywhere in the world, and a delivery performance as well. We're now at the point where 100% of Scotland's electricity is generated from renewable sources, so we're really focused not just on the messaging and the policies around about this, but on the delivery part of it as well. And we see it as a great opportunity as well as a challenge for Scottish business, Scottish technology to develop, innovate and export solutions. So we see many sectors as being part of that, and the construction sector absolutely key to that. Of course, with COP26 coming up in Glasgow in November, it's a hugely important event in terms of global alignment and focus on delivering on the Paris Agreement, the 1.5 degree target for climate change, and really making sure that, that everything's on track. So we're proud that that's happening in Glasgow at this hugely important time, but we also see it as an opportunity to showcase what Scotland is working on, what technology we have across a whole range of sectors. And as I said, the built environment is a really key part of that. The construction sector obviously is the foundation, one of the foundation stones of Scotland's economy. If you'll excuse the pun, a hugely important sector, 8% of the total economy, perhaps more by some measures. Very important economic driver, not just in terms of economic activity it generates, the numbers of people it employs, but also, of course, the infrastructure it puts in place. It supports the rest of the economy, and of course, it's a sector that's got hugely close links with government and the rest of the public sector, with more than half of the sector's demand coming from the public sector. So the growth of the sector is important to the Scottish economy, and it's something that will figure very largely in our national strategy for economic transformation that we're working on at the moment and will be publishing later this year. So making sure that those that alignment is clear, that government understands the sector's challenges and opportunities is something I'm very conscious of and been working very hard on since I took over responsibility for the sector after the election in May. So making sure that that work and that alignment is it happens and is key to how we take forward the agenda is hugely important, and nowhere less so than our approach to the climate challenges. And as I said, we see that as being a huge challenge, but also a tremendous opportunity to drive innovation and put Scotland at the leading edge in terms of built environment and how it faces into the net zero challenges. Construction in the built environment ecosystem, of course, has a cross-cutting impact across so many other sectors of the economy, and that's why it's hugely important that we work together to get this right. And as a chair of the Construction Leadership Forum, you can be sure that this is an issue that we talk about at every meeting. It's absolutely key to the work that we do and the focus we have on how we develop and grow the sector and how we face into those challenges. The Construction Accord that we will be launching soon will see a commitment by both the public sector and industry to work closely together to drive towards the net zero and decarbonisation of the built environment. But for that to be achieved, as I said, it requires strong coordination across all parts of the sector and built environment throughout planning, design, construction and the operation stages, because it's not just obviously about the construction phase. There's what happens before that to make sure that buildings and the built environment is designed with net zero in mind. The innovation plays a key part in that in terms of new materials, new processes and new approaches to construction. And of course the operation stage is hugely important in ensuring that the net zero aspects of the built environment are delivered upon, and behavioural aspects again so important as part of that. So really it's a very rounded picture. There's many different aspects to that. We're very conscious of that in government and very conscious of working with the sector to deliver across the broad range of those requirements. I think there's a number of other aspects here that it's worth touching on at the moment that are challenges the sector faces at the moment, but also have a direct bearing on what the future looks like as we face into and address the net zero challenges. The first of those is around about skills, and skills is something that's always been a challenge for the sector, but particularly so now. It was something we're very conscious of, a very tight labour market. We were worried some months ago, obviously, that the end of furlough would mean perhaps significant unemployment across the economy. Thankfully, we haven't seen that, but what we have seen as a consequence of Brexit's played its part, of COVID and of other factors, is a real labour shortage across the sector. So our commitment to green jobs of the future, to supporting significant investment into training across the economy, is something that we believe is a real support for that need, understanding the transition from sectors that will be impacted by the move to net zero, and supporting the growth sectors that will be able to take advantage of those opportunities, and construction absolutely is one of those sectors. So rest assured, government very focused on the labour shortage and what we can do to address that, both in the short term, but also as we move forward, very much focused on the support we give through Green Jobs Fund and other mechanisms, and in aligning with the sector, with the work government's doing, and with their education institutes to make sure everything is pointing in the right direction. And the second shortage, of course, is material shortages, and something again we're hugely conscious of. I've been chairing a weekly group meeting over the past 2 months to really get hands-on, understand those challenges and address them. And I've met with many businesses in Scotland and across the rest of the UK that are central to the construction supply chain, to understand what government can do to support addressing those challenges. But of course, materials is a key issue as we tackle the net zero challenges in the built environment. Innovative materials, how we're able to develop those opportunities and give them a clear route to market is hugely important. So that addressing those materials challenges, I see very much in that context of what we need to do now to address immediate challenges, but very much with an eye on what that looks like, how those materials that we use at the moment that have a high carbon footprint, how those production processes can be addressed, and the manufacturers I spoke to in the sector are hugely conscious of that, how the carbon footprint across different construction materials and impacts on our net zero ambitions. So I see that has been very much linked in. And that brings me on to the importance of innovation and the key role that the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre plays in all of this. I'm delighted that CSIC are leading and running with this event and others, and they're absolutely core and central to the work that needs to be done for us to maximise the opportunities that present themselves from the transition to net zero. But they're not alone in this. Government, economic development agencies, universities, colleges, and of course businesses, large and small, across the sector and the supply chain are hugely important to that. So it's very much a collaborative effort, very much about working together, seizing those opportunities, understanding what technology has to offer, looking at new materials, new production processes, with the application of digital technology, of course, absolutely key to that, in aligning that as best we can to deliver on our ambitions for the construction sector to deliver on the net zero challenges. So I think just in conclusion, the opportunity that COP26 presents is hugely important, with that being in Glasgow in just a few weeks from now. We all need to focus our attention fully on the transition and understanding how we use COP26 as a spur, as a platform to further accelerate our transition in that direction. Collaboration is absolutely key theme as we accelerate on that journey, working together and to address those challenges, make sure we make the most of that. I'd encourage all of you to seize the opportunity of being engaged in COP26 in whatever way you can. I know there'll be many events on, both within the remit of the official organisation, but many tangential events as well, round about all aspects of Scotland's transition to net zero, including very much on the construction sector and the built environment. And I hope that you're inspired by that to make connections that will help you and to create innovative solutions to any barriers that you may come across along that journey. So this really is the ideal platform to showcase your strengths, talent and ideas here in Scotland and internationally, to tackle the net zero challenge here, but also very importantly for Scotland to be the leading edge of innovation in the construction and built environment, and to make sure we're able to export those solutions internationally as well. Really important to the whole of Scotland's economy and our net zero ambitions. So enjoy the rest of the webinar. I hope it helps you in your move forward in the transition to net zero. And yeah, I look forward to meeting many of you once we get back to face-to-face meetings again in the coming months. So thanks very much again for inviting me today, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Appreciate those opening comments. I believe you're going to stay with us for a little spell, hopefully, for the panel. So a lot of areas in there you touched on that I think are topics we'd like to explore a little bit further with the panel. So appreciate that. I'll pause for just now. We have the first of our polls that we're going to run this morning. So as I say, we've got maybe 3 polls that we'll try and do today. The first one is popping up on your screen just now. So for the audience, if you don't mind having a quick read through that, what best describes where your organisation is on its zero carbon journey? So please select one of those options. You might already be well advanced on that journey. You might be planning and implementing, but not fully there yet. You might be thinking about implementing, or you might be in the research stage, or you might not have started really to take any action yet. Keen to get as many responses as possible, because this starts to give us a wee picture just of where this audience. I appreciate we have 89 people on attending the webinar today, which is great. So I think we had just over 100 signed up, so that's fantastic. Fantastic turnout, which is great. So yeah, keen to get your thoughts just on that initial question. What best describes where your organisation is on its zero carbon journey? We'll give it another couple of seconds and then hopefully see the results. So here we go. So interesting. So yes, a couple of attendees are already delivering best practice by the looks of it. Majority sitting in that kind of planning, got a plan and we're in the implementation stage, or we're building up our knowledge and research. Smaller number in the middle there, just about to start implementing by the looks of it, and again a small number that haven't started really taking any particular action yet. But hopefully this session today can maybe galvanise more people into action, I guess, and give a wee bit of a direction of travel perhaps. So that's great, really appreciate that. Thank you for everybody that's taking part in that first session. What I'll do now is invite all the other panel members to join myself and Mr. McKee. So let's give it a second for everybody to switch their cameras on. Good morning, everyone. Welcome.
Hello.
So great to see you all here today. Thank you very much indeed for your time, first and foremost, and for sharing your insights over the course of the next hour and 10 minutes or so with the audience. We have an audience Q&A session that will open up in about half an hour, 40 minutes. So we'll have about half an hour of audience Q&A time as well. So to the audience members again, please drop your questions into the chat. Some of them you might already have, some of them perhaps as this panel session conversation evolves. So I'll kick off the panel sessions and I'll bring in some particular questions maybe for some of the guests we have today on the panel. Feel free, if any other panel members, just stick your hand up physically probably. I'm not sure this has a virtual hand button, but physically probably stick your hand up. I'll keep my eyes peeled. If you want to jump in on a particular question maybe that I've asked another panel member, please feel free to do so. So Mr. McKee, if I can come to you first, in terms of your introductions, you spoke about 3 key challenges. You identified 3. There are plenty, as we know, but around the skills challenge, around the current issue around material shortages and cost increases, and around innovation, all very pertinent, all very relevant challenges. But you also spoke about the opportunity that COP26 presents, and I suppose one of the challenges we always face is as we move from the policy objectives, which are clear, you know, we've got to decarbonise construction and the built environment by 2045, if not sooner, and we've got milestones on that journey. Moving from the planning stage, the talking stage, to the doing stage, the implementation part, is always a big challenge. Can you tell us, with Programme for Government being launched today, I'm not sure if there's much you can give away around that and steal First Minister's thunder this afternoon, but what are government doing to ensure that the support is in place to help construction built environment community to deliver effective change at the kind of pace that we think we're going to need to go at here?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Stephen. There's we can set that headline ambition and we can lay out milestones, but we need to convert that into action. Now, you need all of that. You need the kind of pyramid. You need the clear direction and vision at the top, but you need all layers of that to be in place. And I suppose as we work our way down through that pyramid, if you like, we've got the climate change plan update, which we published in December. So that puts Scotland on a pathway to meeting its world leading targets over the next 10 years. And there's nearly 150 different policies, sub-policies, if you like, to tackle all the different aspects of that across the built environment, heating, across transport, across energy, with electricity I've spoken about, energy generation, new technologies, offshore wind, hydrogen, all parts of that kind of joined up, if you like, and a real bit of work to make sure that's all coordinated. And if you look at some examples on that, you need to put money behind that, of course. There's government money there, but also attracting investment money as well from the private sector, because clearly, while it's expensive, it is a big opportunity for private sector investors as well. So we're focused on both parts of that. As government, we're investing 1.6 billion over this 5-year period to decarbonise the way we heat our homes and other buildings, reducing emissions, and also, very importantly, tackling fuel poverty and creating jobs as we go forward. Now, involved in a lot of work on our supply chain development programme to understand which of those technologies we can manufacture at scale in Scotland, be it heat pumps or other materials that can contribute to that and create those jobs. So as you can see right away, it's linked up right across the jobs and skills agenda, the poverty agenda, as well as economic development, and of course the net zero agenda. So a huge amount of coordination there, and then it's getting right down to the nuts and bolts of the technical aspects of that, and make sure we've got the capability and the innovation to deliver on that. And obviously, I think that's where organisations like the CSIC are absolutely hugely central to that, in making sure, working with industry to take forward the innovation, which at the end of the day, a lot of these solutions are going to be technical. And as an engineer myself, I know how important it is that we get those bits of it right, as well as everything else.
Superb. And you mentioned the role innovation will play around this, and I suppose we always take the view that there's a lot of innovation already out there that just needs mainstreamed and scaled up, but there are obviously a lot of areas where we still have to do some of the heavy lifting around innovation. What would you like to see, or what more do you think organisations like ourselves and others in this space could potentially do to support the businesses that are keen and hungry to innovate, maybe in this space, but maybe need a bit more support in that wider sense? What other things would you like to see happen in that space?
I think that's right. There's, if you look at that whole kind of innovation journey, if you like, there's a piece about encouraging businesses that are either already in the sector or manufacturing for the sector to look at innovation, but also businesses that aren't in the sector but have technology that could be adapted in the sector to open their eyes to some of those opportunities. So I think there's a kind of network communication piece round about that. Yourselves are doing great work there. NMIS are doing some great work there to link up and engage, and the universities always have some great technology. So I think getting businesses started thinking about what's possible, and then I think there's a very important piece round about making sure we link up public sector and public sector procurement, in particular around about the innovation piece, and create those routes to market for those technologies to give them a foothold and a start, so that they can then generate revenue streams to go forward from there. And I won't pretend that's easy. There's clearly restrictions around about what we can do with procurement. I'm fairly relentless at trying to push the envelope on that, particularly around about innovation, so that we can give those opportunities to those businesses with innovative solutions, technologies, processes, materials, and so on, to get those public sector purchase orders as best we can. But my door's always open to businesses that have got ideas there and feel that they're not getting through the process as well as they could, or for people that ideas for how we streamline those processes. Now, clearly, I'll be honest with you, some of those ideas are going to be better than others, and some of them are going to be really world changing, and others are maybe not quite at the same level, and sifting through that is part of the challenge. But I think we've got to make that process as streamlined as possible. And as I say, I've got an open door when it comes to discussing how best we do that.
Superb, excellent. I think absolutely, certainly in a lot of conversations that we've been having over the last number of months, that space around both I suppose procurement innovation, innovating the procurement system and process perhaps, and indeed procuring for innovation, are vital in terms of how we unlock the potential. Peter, can I come to you? You've been instrumental in helping shape and lead some of the conversations around the introduction of the construction accord that Mr. McKee mentioned in his opening remarks, and a big part of that is around how we create this new partnership, if you want to say that way, between public sector who are a huge client of the construction industry and the sector itself, the entire supply chain. Can you give the audience a little bit more information around what they're likely to see and hear from the Accord over the course of the next couple of months as it comes online and is launched?
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. Of course, yeah. So Ken Gillespie, as you know, the chair of the Industry Leadership Group, and I were asked by Mr. McKee's predecessor to put together a draft of the Accord, and we've consulted widely across industry stakeholders in doing that. And the Accord is all about a shared ambition and commitment to change, and then an agenda for collaborative work to deliver on those ambitions. So decarbonisation is probably the absolute best example of where this is needed across the industry and society as a whole, in fact, really. So the Accord will provide the platform for that dialogue and collaboration. And as Mr. McKee said previously as well, the public sector as the industry's biggest client and all of the construction industry will we hope be party to the Accord and play their parts in that collaboration. And I think of this as we're going to need to be building different things. We're going to need to be building them with different materials, and we're going to need to be building them in different ways across repair, maintenance, enhancement, house building, and civil engineering. So what the Accord, I hope, will do in that is it will help all of the parties develop, for example, the different client skills that will be needed to specify differently for the different things that we will need to be doing. And that will need a dialogue between clients and industry to get that right. It's going to be very wide-ranging across repurposing and refurbishment to new build. And we need to specify in ways which work for the industry to deliver the innovations, and also just to work at its best. And that will require the public sector, again, as Mr. McKee said, to lead change through public investment and new approaches in specifying our requirements. The need for different materials will require investment in production capacity, because the more of that we can capture in Scotland, the better opportunity we'll make for our economy. So again, collaboration between industry and its public sector customers on how we can specify those new products, and whether elements of standardization could drive scale to facilitate the investment that's required in bringing those products to market. And finally, on the different ways to deliver, how clients can support those, and what does industry need to create level playing fields. I've heard a million times, let's say, not a million times, I've heard a lot of times people saying, do you know what, I really wish I could deliver that on this construction site, but if someone else bids not including or an all-electric site, for example, then I know that my way of doing it is going to be slightly more expensive or slightly harder to deliver. So creating the level playing field and moving the level playing field up at a rate that people can reasonably participate in it, but it does move the barrier up, will need, again, that collaboration between industry and the clients to get right. And all of that's before we get into modern methods of construction and digitalization and whole asset life cycles. So finally, for me, then, a lot of people talking, a lot of action around this. So one thing I think the Accord can do is create a platform for the Scottish industry and the Scottish client base to have a shared understanding. So you talked about the UK Construction Leadership Council before, and I sit on the Construct Zero Advisory Group, and Lynn knows better than I that even at that level, we're still working through between the CLC and the Green Building Council, what are the right approaches and the right measurement forms. So providing a conduit for the Scottish industry to get that best information and channel everything through to us in a way that we can have a chance of keeping up with, because none of us can keep up with everything that's going on in this arena. So the Accord, I think, can provide that coordinating platform, a place to bring the tricky points where we could make some progress with concerted effort, and to set the ambition, the shared ambition that we need to make change.
Superb. And industry's right behind us, as you say. There's been wide consultation. Public sector and government officials have been integral in terms of how we shape this, so that the potential is huge. You touched on, Peter, about that opportunity using public sector raise the bar and level that playing field in some respects. And I know Scottish Government are consulting at the moment on the Section 6 energy part of the building regulations, and I'll maybe bring Lynn in on this as well in a minute, because obviously you have a long track record with Scottish building standards strategy and planning. But Peter, first initial thoughts on the approach that the building standards consultation is taken. Obviously there's a number of options that are presented in there, and I should mention we'll stick the link in the chat for those that maybe aren't familiar with it, but we'd encourage everybody that has an interest to please respond to the consultation. I think it's open until towards the end of October, and it presents two models effectively. Peter, you maybe want to give us your thoughts, I suppose, on what the options industry are presented with there, and where, perhaps from a personal point of view, you think we should be heading.
Look, it's not my detail field, as you know. I can see you with a slight grin on the background, so that's always good. But I think this draws together a bunch of things that we've touched on already, which is there is a need for innovation, but there's a lot of things that we've done already and that we know how to do that can deliver what we need to do. So I'm one for boldness in this area, very personally speaking, in that there is nothing in an ambitious set of building standards that cannot be done. It can all be delivered. It will require change, and the harder we push, the faster we push, the faster that change will need to spread through the industry. And there will be elements where people will think that, for example, moving new build on a lot more quickly than existing stock will create value differentials and cost differentials between, in housing, for example, between existing stock and new build. That will take time to work through. But for me, the ambition needs to be set high, and we as an industry need to find a way of stopping creating new problems for net zero as soon as we can, because we know how to do it. And my final point on that, I suppose, is that you and others on the call will know that through the schools program and in the public sector standard for net zero, we've tried to build on the approaches to measuring and the verification and validation over a long period of time how much energy a building uses. And again, personally speaking, I think it's really important that we have ways of assuring ourselves that the buildings that are delivered in practice are delivering what we need over their life cycles. So I think anything the building standards can do to advance that side of things as well will be very welcome over the long term. Absolutely.
Thank you, Peter. Lynn, if I can come to you. So we're at this stage now in Scotland where building standards are under review, Section 6 energy. We have an opportunity to step boldly, as Peter says, towards the future and recognise that we do have a lot of the answers, maybe not all of them, but we do have a lot of the answers to how we do this. You chaired Scottish Government's low carbon building standards strategy for Scotland back in launched in 2007. You perhaps chaired it through 2006, 2007. And I know for many businesses, and the one that I worked for at the time, used that guide in 2007 very much like our kind of blueprint for how we were going to go ahead and at that time invest very heavily in off-site manufacturing and digital manufacturing capability. We accepted, I think at the time as an organisation, there was likely to be changes to that, and things wouldn't always follow, the strict line of that path from beginning to end. And little did we know in 2008 the world would fall off a financial cliff. However, with that guide, with that kind of blueprint, it gave us a lot of confidence, I think, around what the direction of travel looked like. What do you think we need in terms of an industry route map to get us to our net zero milestones now, with 2030, 2045 as key points on that journey? And do you see us having any of those pieces of jigsaw already in place from your kind of historical perspective and current perspective, I guess?
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Well, first and foremost, I think the commitment and the clarity on the end game is there, and it's there big time in Scotland, because you've got the most accelerated target potentially to reach, and you've, since we did the low carbon building standard strategy, and now even more so, there's that consolidation of commitment with industry and government working together. And I think that is a prerequisite to sort of getting on with it, really. And I have looked at the consultation, for instance, and it's not rocket science, as Peter has said. The actual fabric standards and so on are quite doable and being done, and have been being done in many cases for 5, 6, 7 years. So the key to this is sort of solving the more difficult issues, which is making sure it does what it says on the tin, so addressing that performance gap, really looking ahead and making the commitment on long-term energy strategy. Is it hydrogen, is it electric, and how that really plays out for the kind of stock that we have in Scotland. And really identifying the key kind of recipes to achieve that. And I think it's not rocket science, but I think the clarity, and that's really what the Building Standards Consultation has set off. What I'd like to reference is some work I've been doing actually in the run-up to COP with UK Green Building Council, and Peter will know this also from discussions with Construction Leadership Council. Is the route map, because I'm a member of this Green Construction Board, and we actually when we were set up in 2013, we converted the then net zero route map of government to a sectoral route map. And what we're doing now for this COP project, which is UK Green Building Council, and it's going to be compared with World Green Building Council and lots of other countries' roadmaps, is doing a very precise model of what we expect buildings to contribute in terms of emissions, for real, and therefore what trajectory we have to go on if we're being realistic in our assumptions on reaching net zero. And things like you can't just sort of put into a model EPCC, because it covers a whole range of things, and you have to be very precise and about the emission, about the energy to be used, about the systems to be used and their efficiencies, and the emissions that they will produce and that we need to offset with renewable energy. So it's really precise, and I think it will be really, really helpful. And I think particularly in the context for Scotland, because it maps a six carbon budget type trajectory, because Scotland is on an accelerated version of that, we really need to have a particular Scottish version of that. And I think it would be really helpful. So it talks about energy demand of a typical building. And in the case of a retrofit, it's talking about not just a typical building, but a very specific type of typical building. So it's really getting down to the nitty gritty and setting in place all the things. Actually, most of it, all of it was set out in the Heat and Buildings strategy consultation, which I really applaud Scottish Government officials, because it draws together so many threads that they need resolving, but they are the key issues for reaching the net zero target. So it includes the performance gap, it includes the prediction methodologies, it includes the building standards, and they all have to come together really in order to hit the target. So having that route map, I think, would be a really good thing, and we will have the UK version for this COP26 project. But I think it'd be really good to have a very specific Scottish version.
Excellent. So that's certainly something that we've been discussing, and we can pick up in terms of how we develop that Scottish flavoured, but set in the context of wider UK and indeed global transition in this sense. You mentioned about the need to get very particular and specific around how we build to cut the performance gap, particularly, and that aspect of building physics, to make sure that we're delivering the right sort of things in the right sort of ways with the right sorts of building that we're developing, either new or indeed retrofit. it's one of the areas, I suppose, where Sean, if I can bring you in, I know that's an area particularly close to your heart, but Lynn's touched on a couple of areas to do with housing and to do with retrofit and whatnot. You've just recently been involved in the board of the ZEST panel, the Zero Emission Social Housing Task Force that the Scottish Government set up and published its recommendations recently. Could you maybe give the audience a little bit of a flavour of some of the recommendations that have come out of that panel, and indeed where you see that sitting in the context of the journey towards net zero, and perhaps even in the context of COP?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Yeah, delighted to mention that. And the ZEST group was a very intense period over the last few months. It was a real collective effort from the local authorities and the housing associations that participated. And it's produced 8 commitments in the report that were published recently, and it's our 8 recommendations. A strong one being around the fabric first, so we can just build a bit more time as some of the new technologies come through, and maybe that's something to pick up later. Looking at how we engage with the public, because we need to bring and work with the public to have that public engagement as we go through. Looking at workforce and skills, and a key part was looking at the technical issues of, we have specific archetypes in Scotland in our housing stock. The social housing area is about 680,000 homes in Scotland, about 23% of the sector. And therefore, if we could focus on that fabric first, looking at the technical areas, there's an opportunity there as we assess new solutions coming through, because this isn't a here and now just for tomorrow, this is for the next 20 years. We need a pathway which can encourage those innovations. And then going beyond that, the areas around new technologies and what's on the horizon is also very exciting. I have to say, we have to really thank the civil servants of the Scottish Government. They really were fantastically supportive to the entire ZEST group. And just a couple of points, if I may kind of jump ahead on the technologies. There's some really exciting things happening on where we might go with new build. And for example, Perth West development, and I would encourage the Minister, and in fact all the Cabinet, to look at what could come with Perth West development. It's one of the most exciting projects, certainly I've seen in the UK, in terms of its development proposals. And it takes us back to that old age where, in fact, where Perth became a real hub for Scotland, both in transport and other things, and the Innovation Highway and the integration of housing and other commercial type units, which they're looking at. And the other area is around where we may go in heating. And one of the new technologies that's coming is in microwave technologies for your hot water and your heating of your home. And we will wait to see how those go ahead. We've managed to secure 3 of the 20 prototypes for Scotland, so we can trial those in the coming years, and we'll work with the Innovation Centre, I'm sure, when we're doing that. But imagine if you could actually keep all of your existing stock, all of your existing boilers and everything else, both in retrofit and also we're looking to new build, and you're not having to decant and other things. So it's quite exciting what's coming down the road. And any young people on this call, or teachers or others who are watching this, if people are looking at a career, construction is so exciting, and particularly the electrical areas, because when you look at the amount of electrical work that's coming, we probably need double, if not triple, the number of electricians in Scotland with the fantastic work. But I'll leave Alan Wilson and others to discuss that more.
You've teed me up well to invite our next panelist to contribute. So Alan, you're with us today with 2 of what I'm sure are many hats that you probably wear, but one in your role as chair of the wider group of trade professional federation bodies that makes up CICV Forum, that came together last year and has, I think, demonstrated a fantastic approach to collaboration in terms of bringing together a whole bunch of different disparate voices to unite around the challenges that COVID presented. But your day job is as Managing Director of Select, the electrical contractors body. So in that context, Sean's just mentioned obviously the potential around electrification, and I think while Sean's right, there will be a whole range of innovations, new and tried and tested, that we will be deploying at scale. I think it's fairly clear to everybody, whether it's around transport or whether it's around homes, electrification is going to be a huge part of the solution. As we move away from fossil fuels, how are Select and your members gearing up for these changes ahead? And what are Select's members going to look like in maybe 5 or 10 years' time, do you think?
Yeah, good morning, everyone, and thanks, Stephen, and thanks, Sean, for teeing that up very nicely. Appreciate that. If I can just talk a little bit about the CICV just before I go into answering that question directly, Stephen. As you rightly say, the forum's brought together everyone in the whole supply chain, designers through architects, surveyors, the installers and suppliers of product as well. One of the key activities of the CICV is to look at the low carbon targets, energy efficiency from that perspective. I guess what you might say the shop floor, the people will actually do the delivery, will do the designs, will install the products, will supply the material for those products to be connected. And we're very excited too, as a whole sector, to move into this next stage of construction. And there's two key words I would say that are necessary for hopefully all of us to take away today. I would say one is certainty. The industry needs certainty. It needs to be known what its direction of travel is, and it needs to be, given bite-sized chunks. I'm stealing those words, as you know, from you, Stephen, but bite-sized chunks is what the industry needs. And it needs to keep momentum. Momentum. We can't have COP26 and then say, wasn't that jolly good? And then we all go back to our day jobs. We need to keep that momentum going. So on that particular aspect, it was great to hear at the last CICV forum that proposals from our energy efficiency group led by John McKinney and Gordon Nelson suggested an annual low carbon festival, which would take place as part of the Edinburgh International Fest next year, building on John's good work with the Traditional Building Festival. So our proposal is to take forward an annual event which will integrate everyone in the sector in that particular area. So that's good, and I think that from an industry perspective ticks one of the partial boxes around momentum. If I come back to the electrical industry for a moment and answer your question directly, we've said for many years now, and in fact I think we need to change the rhetoric. We've said for many years the future is electric. I think we can probably now say the now is electric, because as everyone has acknowledged, electrification is what is going to be driving our heat, our light, our cars, our other forms of transport going forward. And I think it's really important that that investment in the sector is there. We have a really good workforce at the moment, very skilled people in that industry. There's an element of upskilling that's definitely necessary, and we are up to the challenge on that. We already have undertaken a lot of training and upskilling work. I don't want to take Steve's thoughts away in relation to training, but there's lots of things happening already in the sector which will make the industry better and more agile as it comes to undertaking different types of installations. So just a couple of examples of where we're working just now, and maybe some tasters and teasers for the future. There are obvious things I guess we're all aware of and involved in, perhaps even in our own homes or in our offices, wherever. Solar PV, battery storage, and EV charging. Those are key things which the industry is already involved in, where we know that things are actually often tried and tested technologies are being installed regularly across the country in our homes, as I say, in our offices. But one of the things that we're very keen to get involved in is in the near future is what's called prosumer, which effectively means that individual either houses or groups of houses, or indeed things like shopping centres and others, can effectively come together, take themselves off grid and generate their own electricity, whether that be through wind or solar or a mix or a combination of both. Now, as an example, panelists and the delegates in the call today may or may not be aware, but the Ajax football stadium, Netherlands, they actually have done some really innovative work around, first of all, reusing electric vehicle car batteries and then linking that up so that they provide not only light for the stadium, but also when it's not necessary in the stadium, providing electricity to the grid around Amsterdam. So these are things, not, I think I've heard the word a couple of times used, Peter's used it, you've used it, and others have maybe used it. It's not rocket science per se, but it's there and it's now, it's happening, and we need to grab these opportunities and take advantage of them, because, we've got a challenge with, waste. We talk about waste as being part of the industry's problem as well. So if we have a problem with how we recycle EV car batteries going forward, there's a good innovation idea already, where we can make those products work for us going forward. So lots of opportunities in the sector. We're keen to take that challenge on. The other thing that, again, listeners the conference might not know, is that around 25% of our electricity use is on data. So obviously using this kind of technology, but that is increasing because more and more of us work from home as well. So that's another challenge for the sector, is to get involved in that data side of the industry. So yeah, very excited to be part of the sector, which is going to be such an integral part going forward. We'll take Sean's challenge on board. I'm very pleased to say that we've had record numbers this year of apprentice recruits, over 800 recruited so far, which is excellent numbers, but we need to keep that going. We need to maintain that momentum. So good times ahead for not only the electrical industry, but the industry as a whole if we grab those challenges.
Excellent. Oh, indeed. I think the future does indeed look very positive. And everybody's doing a great job of almost teeing up the next speaker. And Steve Beachy's been sitting patiently. And apologies for we're not coming to you sooner, Steve. But Alan mentioned apprentices there, and while your day job is as business performance director at Balfour Beatty, so working in that coalface around how do you take a tier 1 contractor and drive this sort of change across the organisation. You also chair Skills Development Scotland Scottish Apprenticeship Advisory Board. So I wonder maybe around that sort of skills workforce development space in the context of COP26 perhaps being a launch pad for what comes after rather than an end destination. What do you see? I suppose, as the kind of key opportunities that we can embrace around workforce development going forward? And then I've got maybe a supplementary question around leadership and those sorts of skills.
Yeah, so thanks for the introduction, Stephen. I think to answer both those questions in one, to try and be as efficient as I can, I think we need to, as an industry, is face up to where we are. And I hear a lot in the media, as we all do, about climate emergency. And emergency is defined in the dictionary as a serious, unexpected, and often dangerous situation requiring immediate action. So I think, with all the work we do with the Scottish Government, who are very ambitious about how we change and develop and improve the way we train people, we need to instill a bit of pace in how we actually train both our operatives, our skilled technicians, but also our leadership. And I think there's a lot to do in terms of the new technologies that are coming in that will allow us to reduce embodied and operational carbon. But going back to the leadership question, I think we've got a lot of key leaders around the industry, and in an emergency situation, people tend to do a number of things. Either they freeze and do nothing, or they wait until they're asked to help, or they take control and take charge of the situation. And I think a new set of leaders will emerge coming out the other side of this crisis, where people will start to take control and start to take charge. And I think we need to develop more of those leadership abilities. And a few of the panelists this morning have talked about the importance of collaboration, the importance of trust, the importance of transparency, of good communication. They're all behavioural things. They are things that we need to do more and more to develop in our leaders at government level, so we can start to get standards, policy and law that forces people to do the right thing through the procurement of the assets that we're collectively constructing. What I'm thinking out particularly is, do all our architects that come out of university and do all of our designers who may come out of college or university fully understand how that asset that they've designed is going to behave and is going to live and how it's going to operate? Possibly not. Some do, many don't. So I think there's a huge amount to do around the behaviours that will allow us to develop the people who make a difference. Then there's a huge amount to do around design in terms of the components we use, how we assemble those components. People call it modern methods of construction, design for manufacturing and assembly. But do we truly, when we are designing a road or a building or a tunnel or a hospital, do we truly think about at the point of design, what is the most efficient way to assemble this? And then once we've assembled it in a very efficient way, how will that building or asset operate over the life cycle that it's going to operate? So I think, to answer that question, I think there's a lot to do, but it does come back to leadership. It starts with the government, it goes through the supply chain, but I think one of the biggest issues is around design, because we need to get the design of our assets absolutely correct. And as well as training the new people we've got coming through our schools, our colleges and our universities, we might just have to go back and retrain the people who currently do these roles, our architects, our specifiers, our planners, our estimators. There might be a lot to do with retraining, but the ambition is there, and with the work we're doing, as you say, with the Scottish Apprenticeship Advisory Board, we are looking at more pace, more agility, more relevance than there's ever been for the needs of society, not just employers. So hopefully that answers that question, Stephen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess I'm conscious of time. We've got another poll to squeeze in a second, and then 5 minutes or so before we head to the audience Q&A. But Peter, on the training point, and Steve's touched on the kind of wider skills and workforce development challenges and opportunities. You wanted to come in on the training point.
Yeah, it's just a wee quick point is that something we've done recently at Scottish Futures Trust is to make sure that everyone in our organisation has basic climate literacy training as part of their annual mandatory training requirement. And I know most organisations do GDPR and we do IT security and all of those things, and we do that as well. But we thought that because this was so important to everyone to understand, that we've made, I mean, it's high-level training, but just to get everyone's across the whole organisation's climate literacy up to that baseline level, that we could all have the same conversation and use the same language about it. And we found that a really great thing to do as a first step on this for the organisation as a whole. I just thought I'd mention that it can be a useful thing. There's plenty of providers out there, and I'm happy if anyone wants to get in touch, I can put you in contact with people that can help with that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Peter. And absolutely, yeah, we'll share relevant links or indeed contact details. It's so important, I think, that given, and certainly something we've recognised as an innovation centre, that is trying to help an industry navigate a whole variety of different areas, from product, process innovation, service innovation, business model innovation. There's no shortage of areas that we could spend our time talking about innovation. But one of the signs we have in our factory as you walk through is a prototype saves 1,000 meetings, and it's in that spirit of a picture tells 1,000 words. It's about doing, and it's about action, and it's about trying, and often in the innovation space it's about failing and then trying again, and it's that resilience. How quickly do you get back up and keep pushing that forward? So no, I think that's a really important part, is to develop that kind of climate literacy across all organisations, so that when we're having these complex conversations around, and to Steve's point, we're really talking about system change in a lot of these aspects, and it's the leadership skills, the mindset skills, the behaviours that we need to adopt as an entire sector ecosystem, I guess, to really tackle that is not going to be without its challenges. But indeed, we are an incredibly creative, innovative industry and sector. We solve problems every day, often very complex ones, and I don't think we often get recognised as an industry for the great work that we do. We often get criticised when it maybe doesn't always go right, but the times are few and far between. And I think that opportunity to really think about how we are going to do things differently at a system level is going to be one of our big challenges moving forward. Listen, I've managed to bring everybody in on various different points. I'm conscious of time. I'm going to go to the second poll now, so hopefully my colleagues will pop the poll up on the screen. There we go. So yeah, coming back to COP26, we're really interested as an innovation centre about the legacy of COP. So it's not an end destination, it's a starting point, if anything. What would you like the legacy from COP26 to be for the built environment? So again, if you want to pick your favourite kind of option out of those options, and if you read far enough down, it might shade your thinking. But zero carbon targets and the tools to measure progress is perhaps an area that as a legacy might be useful. National route map, we've discussed that a number of times today in the conversation, to help everybody navigate that journey. More collaboration, more knowledge exchange, more sharing. Again, I think we've spoke quite a lot about that today. And access to innovation, business and skills support, or indeed is it everything? So I wonder where we're going to see the results of this pan out. We'll give it another couple of seconds just to hopefully give everybody the opportunity to answer. But yeah, I think that's one of the important objectives, I guess, of COP, is for us as a sector to use it as a building block for the future. Again, apologies for the pun, but so there we go. Yeah, I mean, I think it's clear, you know, half the audience, and we're still at 80 attendees, so half the audience would like to see all of those things come forward as legacies, but specifically that route map, that kind of how do we get from where we are to where we need to go to. We often use the kind of mission to Mars analogy. We know we want to get to mission to the moon analogy. We know we want to get to the moon. The tough challenge is how do we get there? What do we need to now do in terms of action? So appreciate that. Thank you everybody for your contributions. Time-wise, I think I've got a couple of questions I'll bring in at the end, if you don't mind, but maybe over to the audience questions. I'm just looking to my colleagues in the chat, see where we are with the audience questions just now. Okay, so some questions coming in now. So thank you. Let me just read these out, and I'll come to if there's a particular panel member wants to answer, give us a quick wave. So first question, what can the industry do and what support do we need from government to attract adult career changers into construction, including those transitioning from sectors like oil and gas? Mr. McKee, I'll maybe come to you first on that one from a government perspective, and then anyone else, a quick show of hands.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the remarks I made earlier, understanding what those journeys look like for individuals and being in a position to support them with that is hugely important. So looking at the sectors and the skills and the jobs across the economy that are going to be less in demand as a consequence of the transition, and those very much that are going to be more in demand, and clearly this sector falls into the latter, is hugely important. So there's a big focus on that with the funding we put into the Green Jobs Fund and other funding streams that are there. And it's all part of that just transition activity. So very much looking at both ends of that. So we're obviously hugely conscious that when the economy went through previous transitions, either energy related or deindustrialisation or so on and so forth in previous decades, a lot of this stuff wasn't considered at all, and you end up with communities and individuals, for want of a better word, thrown in the scrap heap. So we're hugely conscious of it from that angle, but also the other end of it, which is the sectors that are needing those skills and how we join the dots there. And again, like everything else, that's a wide project. It's government, it's putting the funding in, it's aligning with the education system, it's aligning with different sectors. It's about understanding the timing so we get that right as well. But absolutely we're focused on that, but always looking for opportunities to do it better.
Excellent. Thank you. Anybody else? Peter?
So I'm going to say nothing other than the blindingly obvious in this, I guess, but the first thing will be about selling the industry as part of the solution to all of this. And everything that we've just talked about shows that the construction and related wider industries are, as Mr. McKee said, a massive part of Scotland's strategy to decarbonise. And the other thing that I think is particularly important, I know we talked about in the work around the recovery plan and the Accord, is to find ways for all of us from our little bits of the industry talking about all of what's out there within the industry. Because when we speak with our friends that are adults, when we go and speak in schools, as many of us do, if we're only able to talk about the wee bit that we do, then every conversation will learn what an architect might be able, what they could do as an architect or what they could do as an electrician. But if we're all better able to communicate about the full range of opportunities to work with people, to work with your hands, to work with your mind, to be creative and to be analytical across the whole industry, then we can appeal to that wide breadth. And the best people to sell the industry are the people within the industry, because quite often outside, as we know, it's just seen as people in hard hats and wellies and yellow jackets. And we need to tell everyone that it's so much more than that. So I think it's about us using our understanding of the breadth of what's in this industry to sell it to all of our friends and all the young people that we come across.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and certainly something I know and we've done quite a lot of things at the Innovation Factory where we've brought, you know, classes of school children here, for example, and you do the usual introduction, you know, who's interested in a career in construction of the built environment, and a couple of hands go up perhaps because they have family or other contacts that do, and then we show them the possibility, we show them the art of the possible, we show them the innovation, we show them the the way that this industry is actually helping or will help to tackle climate change, to have a real purpose in that sense, and then having showed them all of that and the robots and the gadgets and the gizmos as well. It's amazing how many more hands are really interested in the construction space. So I only wish we could do that almost every day of the week. But Alan, I'll bring you in first, and then Sean, I'll come to you.
Yeah, thanks, David. Just to answer the specific question, we at Select have been involved with Scottish Government over a number of years in helping to train electricians who have come from offshore back onto onshore, because there are some subtle differences in the aspects of work. So we've been happy to help out the government there in providing that training. We also operate a scheme which is called crediting electrotechnical competence. So if someone doesn't have a formal technical qualification, we can work with them to get them to that level. But just picking up the point that Peter made, I think it's a really good point, is engagement with people at all ages in relation to construction. And again, our training organisation SECT in normal times operates what's called a CABIC training operation, which allows schools, certainly unfortunately, as you say, the time and money and resources an issue, but schools certainly in the Lothian area to come together on a competition basis across all aspects of construction, not just electrical. It deals with plumbing, it deals with design, brickwork, etc. And it's great to see kids, of about 13, 14, really engaged and really involved in this type of work. And what was great for me a few years ago is that the class that won it, there's 6 usually in a team, were all girls, and that's fantastic. We need to engage with these people at an earlier time. But yeah, there are opportunities for people in the existing workforce to retrain, reskill, and we can assist, and other organisations I'm sure could assist with that too.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alan. Sean, you want to come in as well?
Yes, just to pick up on Peter's point, I fully agree. We need to be, as it were, cross-selling all the different opportunities that there are. And we did that recently, just obviously prior to COVID, although since then it's been more online. But prior to COVID, we engaged with like 1,200 pupils and their parents. And specifically on the night when it was subject choice night, when they were considering what subjects they might choose. And the feedback from the parents and the teachers, and we told them about all the areas that are happening in data, the type of skills or construction jobs on site, the different types of careers that you can have right across the construction sector. The feedback was the mums and dads, the guardians or the teachers were saying, we had no idea, one, about the salaries, no idea about the kind of different entry routes that there were, didn't realise there were so many. So I think, yeah, there's a combined effort by the sector. And then separate to that, maybe we could dovetail. So the Scottish Funding Council has recommended to Scottish Government that there's an opportunity around the university's estates for some of the pilots, for some of the technologies and projects, given the estate projects which are coming. And that's an opportunity because we get a lot of young people that come to universities as part of open days and other things, sometimes when they're 14, 15, 16, just thinking about, or even primary schools, what they might do in the future. So there's an opportunity also to sort of incorporate or join together those visits that come to some of the campuses, with then a chance to show what the construction sector is doing around some of these new low carbon and new infrastructure type facilities. And finally, of course, the other area is what we do in infrastructure per se. And I think it's really exciting. And I think about the amount of civil engineers, environmental engineers we are going to need with the amount of infrastructure coming. It is incredibly exciting as an opportunity for career paths for people as well.
Superb. No, I couldn't agree more. And that point around using the university estate as a real test bed for innovation and driving new things has always been I couldn't even remember how many conversations we've had with. We obviously sit right in the middle of that wider university community, and they have, universities have some of the best academic expertise in the world working in these areas, yet the campus that's been developed around the corner often for those academic experts is perhaps not delivering best practice. It's certainly doing good stuff, but it's perhaps not pushing the envelope as far as it could. And this is a great opportunity for us to really galvanise those thoughts moving forward. So great, thank you for the comments on that one. Next one, I'll maybe come to Lynn on this one first. And the question that's come in is, do you think that skills for designing and building with low carbon materials, example perhaps as timber, should be prioritised in the green jobs ambition and net zero material supply chain that we've been talking about this morning?
Well, I think one of the things that I thought we might touch upon is that sort of definition of net zero, really. And one thing we haven't been counting very well is the emissions impacts of materials. And obviously there's a great potential story, not only on renewable energy, which is the supply, the other side of the the supplying side, but yeah, of using homegrown materials and so on. And I think once we start counting that capital carbon, as it's called, which you have to if you're doing this route map, by the way, because you can't just ignore it, because once you've squeezed all the operating energy down, you're still left with this massive burden of the stuff that we're using. So yeah, once you start counting that, and you have to do the whole life carbon perspective, then those things really come into play. And I think it's a whole area which, because we've had virtually no regulation in this area, I think we really need to come up to speed fast with. And there's a potential big win with local materials, the circular economy, and indeed timber. And
I think to the questioner's point around, the need to develop the skills in terms of design and accreditation and the delivery side, that's a massive opportunity where you've rightly pointed out. It's not an area, as we've done so much around operational carbon over the last years, it's actually highlighted, I suppose, the lack of progress maybe around embodied carbon and that whole life carbon approach. So it's a huge kind of almost I appreciate there are pockets of expertise that are great at this, and you've engaged with a lot of them over the years, but in a widespread mainstream sense, that is probably one of the biggest challenges perhaps for the sector, is how do we tackle the embodied carbon aspect of this?
Indeed, and actually for designers, the first step is designing out waste, isn't it? So it's actually using materials optimally. These materials are really on loan. We can't just keep taking stuff from the earth and not replacing it. So actually it's a whole aspect of both design and specification that's relevant to design, and then of course big knock-on effects for the whole industry. Designing for disassembly, for instance, is the ultimate. So yeah, the materials are on loan, so we reuse them.
Yeah, no, indeed. It's back to that point Steve made around the kind of the system change thinking, the leadership approach to this. There's a whole load of ways we need to think differently around the assets that we already have. And to that point, there's a question that's come in, whoever fancies taking this one. Do we have sufficient depth of knowledge regarding our current building stock to make informed decisions on the interventions to maximise the reduction in carbon emissions and maximise the economic benefit of these interventions? So really around that, do we have the knowledge, expertise yet to really understand what we should be doing in a deep retrofit sense? And that maybe leads us into past 2035, 2030 and Retrofit Academy and various different other organisations. Anybody want to dive into this space quickly? Sean, you go first.
I think we have most of the knowledge that we need. I think the areas around it's looking at the different solutions that will need to be sort of addressed into these. I think there's also an opportunity to learn, also see what's happening overseas with some of their aspects, particularly on some of the energy technologies and where they may go. Do we need a better condition survey of the Scottish housing stock? Absolutely. Do we have the data out there probably to bring a lot of that and accelerate it? Possibly yes, but it's sitting in other areas. And I think that our local authorities and housing associations need all the support they can get to have a much better and deeper understanding of the existing condition stock that they have, which then helps maximise the carbon reductions and the system solutions that we'll put in for the archetypes. But that needs to happen in the short term, and because the sooner we know that, then we know the targets that we're needing to go after. We have generally in the past done retrofit, but we didn't do post-occupants evaluation. We didn't understand what was its real benefit overall. We didn't look at or map the energy reduction, carbon reductions, and we didn't sometimes look at what was the fuel savings. And if fuel poverty is a key area, then it's something we really need to know more about, because then if we could identify the optimum solutions, then the better we can get the skills ready, the jobs ready, the industry ready, the supply sector ready, as we roll out a mass retrofit across what could be 2.6 million homes with the key archetypes.
Yeah, indeed. No, I think Peter is aware, in a construction leadership forum sense, I co-chair the data and insights subgroup with Peter's colleague Paul, and it's one of those areas where, you know, there's a lot of information we do have, but there are so many gaps and there's so much information that we need to gather to build that data picture up, to then use it to inform the insights and the decision making going forward. So there's no shortage of areas where we would like to develop that further. And as you say, there's probably a lot of bits of that out there, but we haven't had an approach, I guess, to new build or retrofit work, which has allowed us to capture more of that as we go. So we've got quite a bit to do to catch up. Steve, sorry, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I agree with Sean's points, and I want to go back to something Alan said on the industry needs more certainty, and I agree with that, but we have the lowest levels of certainty that we've ever had because of a number of changes that we've all gone through, most notably the pandemic. And it's the issue, and it's the point that Sean's making. What do we need to use our spaces for? You know, we've seen retail in decline and shops being used as COVID centres. For obvious reasons, schools and universities haven't been as full, offices aren't as full. So that uncertainty, I think, reinforces the need for real deep collaboration between government, with universities, with society, you know, just to rethink how we do what we do. Because the certainty levels, I think, are as low as they've ever been.
Indeed. Thank you, Steve. Another question that's came in. The question is, sorry, hang on, just as I read them, there's more questions popping in, so it's scooping up the screen. How will change be enabled if there is no vision of digitalisation, so there is a functioning competency management ecosystem, so the sectors can intelligently understand the impact of net zero and future competency demand? Oof, there's a question. Right, I might need to read the question again just to understand it. If anybody grasped that one, feel free to jump in. So how will change be enabled if there is no vision of digitalisation, so there is a functioning competency management ecosystem, so the sectors can intelligently understand the impact of net zero on future competency demand? Anybody? Sean, and then Peter.
I think it's coming back to that education around data and skills, and that how we're embedding a lot of the digital education. And we know from the Logan report, you know, digital and data skills are a key facet for going forward. It was included in the programme for government last year. So there is across all fronts a recognition that that needs to happen. I think it's then the interrelationship between, as we look at those digital skills and the data and other things that come in, are we then looking at the interoperability of the future smart sensors, smart infrastructure? So as we're gathering that data, we're making those informed decisions. The data, the digital skills are all helping to envelop, to create, as almost underpinning the pathway. They are not the solutions, but they are an integral part of how we understand where we need to go. And unless we get that right, then we may still be a bit slow and in our response and productivity-wise, and then we maybe don't get that pan-Scotland approach that we really need to drive forward to deliver beyond COP26.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you, Sean. Peter.
I was going to give a sort of generic non-answer to the question, which is that we can only start from the point we're at now, and we need to improve a whole bunch of different things. We need to improve the digital skills across the sector. We need to improve our competency management in a whole range of different things. I would love to see, as we talked about on one of your webinars a couple of weeks ago, an industry-wide library of competencies for all of the activities that we do, and how do we train people to achieve those competencies and accredit the competencies when we get there. And so that how do we manage the very broad competency set, including competencies for digital, is a very big part of where we need to get to. But we can't wait until we've built any of those individual building blocks before we make progress on everything at the same time, would be my response, I suppose.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, Alan.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. I think maybe just building on that, I think, you know, Peter and Sean have highlighted, you know, one of the challenges the sector has is that there is so much information out there that finding your way through it is a challenge, you know. at a CLF meeting a couple of months ago, the Minister hosted, we were asked, or a number of us were asked, to give kind of similar presentations on COP in the future. And one of the things that we all agreed is that there needed to be a central point of information so that whatever part of the sector could actually drill into that and say, well, this is the data is here, you know. And I think there is so much great data out there, you know, in areas that Sean's talked about, you know, the condition of homes, Peter's point about, you know, what technologies have worked and what haven't, you know, areas to learn from. And I think that is one of the key things we need to take, you know, back to my question about, you know, our point about momentum. That's one of the things I think the industry needs. You know, it needs to see this happening. It needs to have a visibility, effectively led by government, to say this is where the information is, this is where you can capture it. You know, it's all in the central bank, and you know, we can all either individually, collectively as trade bodies, as forums, as CLFs, you know, tap into that information. But lots of it is there. It's just distilling into, back to this point that you made again before, bite-sized chunks.
Yeah, making it kind of manageable in that sense. Okay, right. I am conscious of time. We've got 10 minutes left. There are loads of questions coming in on the chat, but there's one I wanted to ask in a kind of quick fire round approach, panel, if you don't mind. So each panel member I'll come to just on the order you're on my screen just now, but could you let me know what you think your top two kind of key takeaways are ahead of COP? Now, we might ask this question again after COP, but what do you think your top two takeaways are going to be in terms of the lead up to COP? So, Lynn, I'll maybe come to you first.
Key takeaways pre-COP.
Pre-COP, key takeaways.
Well, so many people want to say how wonderful they are, so which is all good, you know, and we know the investment community is raring to go. But what we need to do, and particularly because our sector plays such a big part, is to actually identify, you know, the real nuts and bolts of this, as well as, you know, working very hard to do them, to achieve them at best value for money and you know, and upskilling at the same time. So I think that clear target thing is absolutely critical. We've been wallowing for too long in this sort of aspirational zone. And, you know, if key investors are saying, you know, we want to be net zero by 2030, then all their buildings potentially, we have to tell them, you know, how to do that. So this is a tremendous opportunity. It's not just about getting on the bandwagon, it's actually about setting, you know, the right path going forward.
Superb. Thank you, Lynn. Alan, your top two kind of key takeaways you think you'll take from COP?
Yeah, well, I think I've touched on them before. You know, what the industry needs is it needs certainty, and we need to maintain the momentum. So momentum pre and post COP are the important things for me in the sector. You know, the sector has been around this part of work for many, many years. I personally have been around renewable technology for nearly 20 years of my career, you know, and there's been many false dawns, false starts, you know, but we're past all of that now. So let's get the momentum going. Let's move us forward into the next phase of installations, etc.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan. Mr. McKee, your key takeaways ahead of COP?
Yeah, first thing I would say, I think, is collaboration. I think the different players across the ecosystem working as closely as possible together to make sure we're all aligned as government, industry, innovation centre, universities, businesses right across the sector, I think is hugely important, because these are big challenges that we need to face into with a common understanding of how we're going about that. And I think the point that Lynn makes about investment is hugely important, and we've done a lot of work on the Global Capital Investment Plan, the Green Investment Portfolio, ESG investing in particular, ethical finance. So there's an open door there, because investors are really hungry for this stuff. And you're absolutely right, Lynn, it's getting those offers lined up. There's a lot of work happening on that investable pipeline propositions, if you like, as part of that, the work that's been done on the capital investment plan. And I think we've just got to make sure that's all lined up ready for COP, so that we've got something to showcase there.
Excellent, excellent, thank you. Steve, come to you next.
Yep, I think to follow up on what Lynn said, I think education, so that not just a light touch, but we train and educate in such a way that we start to actually do things that make a difference. So education, number one, and then design. It all starts with design. It all starts with how well trained and educated the designer is, but it all starts with design, education and design.
Thank you, Steve. Sean, same question to you.
I'll probably be controversial, if I can be the academic controversial. I think certainly for pre-COP, I would like to see joint agreement that when we talk about net zero, we know exactly what we're talking about. No point setting a target for net zero if people are thinking it's only operational and we're doing all this great work in embodied carbon and it's actually not part of the net zero outcome. So I'd rather see that we had a target set for operational net zero by a certain year and then building up with embodied and then whole life. So when we're talking about 2045 or 2050, we're actually looking in the round right across the carbon sphere. And the second point would be, we don't want to turn out what Paris did. So Paris took 3 to 4 or 5 years to actually get joint agreement from all the countries on 1.5 degree change. We don't want COP26 to be okay, we've all agreed this at the meeting, but actually it takes 5 years to actually sign into legislation in the 200 countries. If we're really keen and it is a climate emergency, and this is every country, not just Scotland and the UK, it's everyone, then we need to make sure that we follow up quickly to deliver on whatever recommendations that come out from COP26 and take them forward.
Superb, thank you, Sean. And last but not least, Peter.
And so I'll do a global one first and a local one second. But first of all, we've been talking today about mitigation and delivering net zero, but our industry has a lot of pressure and will face increasing pressure to be part of the need to adapt to the climate change that's here already. So what I think we need from COP26 is the global agreements to show that mitigation has a chance of working, so that it's rational for us all to keep pushing on mitigation and not to turn our attention to adaptation, which it would be rational to do if we didn't think that everyone was going to be investing in mitigation. So I think that adaptation mitigation, we've seen the weather issues that have come from climate change playing a bigger part across the US, Europe over the summer. So that's going to be a bigger part of the discussion. More locally, I think that what COP26 I hope will bring is a recognition, increased recognition for everyone across Scotland that this isn't an optional extra to be considered for yourself as a personal choice or for your organisation as a traditional sort of financial cost benefit analysis. It's something that we have to do, but neither is it everything. And we at SFT will always consider people, place, prosperity and planet, but we must all do more every time we do something to improve it. But we're doing a great job. You know, we can't beat ourselves up. As Mr. McKee said, overall for our industry, this is an opportunity, not a threat. And we have a central role to play in decarbonising Scotland. That the perception of that and the public perception of that will come from COP26 can only help us in that aim.
Superb. Thank you, Peter. Right, I'm going to go back to one fantastic question that's come in, and if you can keep the answers brief, because I'm conscious I have 3 minutes to do the final poll and wrap up as well. So final question is, in a personal capacity, and I'll come around you all very quickly if you can keep your answers brief, hopefully. In a personal capacity, what are you doing to reduce your own carbon footprint? Lynn?
I've been working so hard and a working mother and all the rest of it. My house is at best, you know, a medium performer. I am doing myself a proper plan and seeing how I can tackle getting as low as I'm preaching to others. So you know, that's a big part of my footprint. Obviously, travel's another one, but which I necessarily have minimised. But yeah, that you have a plan to decarbonise your house and make it more comfortable, and that's I'm now trying to put that into practice in a very thorough way.
So walking the walk, brilliant. Thank you, Lynn.
Yeah.
Alan, yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Well, personally, we are moving into electric vehicle complete from a few months' time from now. We've been driving a hybrid for 7 years. From a Select perspective, we talked before, and Lynn sort of touched on this, and you've mentioned that, you know, talk the talk, walk the walk. So we will be replacing our heating systems next year with solar PV, battery storage, and air and ground source heat pumps. significant investment. So we have to, as you say, invest in what we're saying.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan. Minister, what are your decarbonisation plans in a personal sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I walk as much as possible and get in the train wherever possible, and drive as little as possible. I've just put in an planning application last week to install solar panels on my roof, but I live in a building that's 1870, so it's got all kinds of retrofit challenges. So I'm really keen to understand what else I can do given the structure of this property.
Good luck with that. I'm sure you'll have some colleagues in your ministerial world that can help with the planning process, perhaps on that one. Listed building consent, perhaps. Sean, be yourself.
I recently moved into a new home, but it was built under the regulations of 5 years ago. So that's not a go at the minister, but just and then the regulations. So what we'll do is install a EV charging point, and we'll put in some solar PV. I mean, it's good to see other housing nearby, which is more recent developments, will have the solar PV because they came within. But I think there's a gap there we kind of need to close off, which is why we're still building construction sites with no solar PV, even though it's been around for a while. And the other brief thing I just mentioned is waste recycling. We did a study recently for Midlothian Council looking at how much of that waste which is recycled, where does it go and what's its carbon footprint? And tremendous, 94% of all the waste that's going into recycling in Midlothian is being reused into other products. But it could power 7,000 homes. That was the embodied carbon in 1 year, or power 5 billion smartphones for recharging. So I'm now doing everything I'm doing in recycling. I'm going, I can save that, I can save that, we can save that. And it all makes a contribution.
Superb. Thank you, Sean. And I'm conscious we're keeping over time. So Peter first, and then Steve, if you don't mind being brief, that'd be great.
Well, I mean, I've had a plug-in hybrid vehicle for some time now. I'm committed to fly less. But I guess, given the topic that we're on, I'm speaking to you from my tree house, which is an engineered timber structure designed and built in Scotland with a net zero carbon heat source.
Fantastic. Excellent. Living the dream. And Steve, to close out on that point.
Yeah, like many others, for the last few years, actually, I use public transport a lot. Buses and trains wherever I can. I'm consciously trying not to use the car.
Excellent, superb, and yeah, I mean, it's a mattering of all of those things from one personal point of view as well, from electric vehicles to a plan to decarbonise the house. So yeah, it's in the middle of our world. Listen, thank you all very much indeed for that. We had one more poll, but I'm conscious that we've crept over time. So unless my colleagues who are organising the back end of this pop the poll up, we might skip that, catch it for another time. And I'll wrap up today just by firstly thanking the audience for taking time to join us today. I hope you got as much out of it as possible. Apologies for not getting through all the questions, but great that there have been so many. Also like to thank our panelists for sharing their insights into a lot of really interesting areas and huge amount of valuable knowledge there. And also to Mr. McKee for his opening remarks and for staying with us throughout the panel. I know you've got no shortage of things on your to-do list for today, so we won't hold you up any longer. Finally, just to close out and say that the chat function we've put up all the various different links in the chat function for various things we've been discussing today, so please do access them as and when you need to. And in the lead up to COP26, during and beyond, the Innovation Centre with partners will be hosting a whole range of different activities, some virtual like this, some live hopefully if circumstances allow, and some that are very hands-on so we can get involved in some of the things. We've got some training things planned and some live build activity that we'll be sharing more information on. So thank you very much again, everybody, for your time today. Really appreciate it, and look forward to welcoming you to our next event in the not too distant future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.